Hi, everybody. I'm Carin. I'm an alcoholic. Thomas. My sobriety date is September the 8th, 1988. And next month I will, hopefully, celebrate my 37th year of continuous sobriety. I am what's commonly referred to as a one-chip wonder. Came in once and never left. I'd like to say that I had something to do with it, but I know by now that I had zero to do with it. So how many of you have been coming to this step meeting since we started this series? Good. Okay, so just to wrap up where we've been, we're all living in the first step. Everybody who's in this room lives in the first step, which says that I'm powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it, and my life is definitely unmanageable when I'm not. And I absolutely know the second part is true without a doubt, because I haven't had a drink in a very long time, and this week my life appears to be unmanageable by me alone. So here we are. So, I don't really know what to do with that, except that you come into the second step and we have to come to believe in something. It really doesn't matter what it is. They can call it, AA is very good at renaming things so that they look different, but they all mean the same thing. And so we have to come to believe in something in the second step. It doesn't matter what it is that is going to relieve us of this craziness of living in the first step. Because if I am powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it, and my life is unmanageable when I'm not, then I'm screwed. And so I need something in the second step that's going to show me, that's going to take me, that's going to push me into places where I don't want to go, so that I can somehow be restored, restoration, rebuilt to some semblance of sanity. And then last week we talked about how does that happen? Well, that's where the kicker comes, because you have to make a decision. You got to make a decision you're going to do this. You got to make a decision that you're going to take your life and your will along with it, although by the time I got to step 3, I didn't really know what my will was, but my life, and bring it over into the care of something that you don't yet believe in. That is very tricky. Well, what's the alternative? We don't have the alternative. We have to do that if we want to stay sober. And any of you who've come in multiple times, and I wholly admire people that have come in multiple times, understand that when you don't take that third step, when you do that sort of BS thing that says, it says make a decision, but I don't have to do anything, welcome back to your white chip. When it says make a decision, you make a decision and you do something. You do something. So that brings us to step 4, which is, oddly enough, when I was sort of doing my kind of research on step 4, and I haven't been really good about bringing up the books, so I hope you don't mind, but I'm a book reader in my home. I'm a 12 and 12 devotee when I'm working with another sober alcoholic going through the steps, or with the big book. But when I'm in front of a group of people, I can only tell you how I did it. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you what worked for me. So one of the things I find most interesting about step 4 is the principles. And I don't know where they are in here. Maybe they're nowhere in here. But you get the principle of courage after you do step 4. That's kind of a weird thing, because step 4 says that we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That alone would get me out the door. That alone. Searching, fearless, moral, all of those things you want from me. And I don't have any idea how to do that. And yet they tell me in the principle, and you get the principle after you do the step, after you do this moral inventory, is that all of a sudden you have courage. So that started me thinking about the difference between bravery and courage. And they are 2 different things. So you have to be brave to do the 4th step. And bravery is like the private in the army. He's brave. But the commander in the army, he has courage. Because the private is doing what's being asked of him, and he does not know what's going to happen at the end. But the commanding officer who's asking you to do this, he's courageous, because he knows exactly what could happen at the end. So when they tell us that we're going to take the 4th step, we have to be brave about it. Brave means that I'm into some place where I have no idea what's going to happen. And I had some instances with bravery before I did the 4th step. So what was the first one? Being brave enough to find a sponsor. That's the first act of bravery most of us do in this program, is to find a sponsor. Because what happens when you ask a sponsor to sponsor you and they say no? It could happen. But we're so dumb, bravely dumb, that we ask some guy or some girl who looks like they have what we want, who looks like the person that's going to keep me sober, and they, of course, understand that they have nothing to do with your sobriety. So when you ask them to be a sponsor, it really doesn't matter whether they say yes or no. I want to make that clear. If they say no, go find another one. They say, yes, go work with this one. It doesn't really matter, but I'm brave enough to do it. So that's the first act of bravery. Second act of bravery, which is much more private, is making connections in the program, saying hello, having somebody call me by my name, having me call you by your name. It gets harder as you get older, by the way. I'm not so good at it anymore. I mean, I know your face, but I don't know your name, and people get used to it. But, that's an act of bravery. Because what happens if you don't say hello back? What happens if you don't care? What happens if you formulated opinions about me already, and I was brave enough to ask you to coffee after the meeting? It's the worst thing that happens. You don't have coffee. Go have coffee after another meeting. It doesn't matter. I know that I told you a story about, knocking out this guy in AA, my friend Winky Don, and, he was part of the elite in my meeting, really the elite. I'm sure they're in here somewhere, but he was part of this group of elite guys who after the meeting would go to the diner across the street. And they would sit at the diner, all 6 of them, and it's kind of like the guys that sit outside when they smoke their cigars here in that big circle. That's what they did, but they used to do it in the diner because you could smoke in those days. And they would come in the diner and they would, talk, I don't know, wisdom with each other. Who knows? But I know that one day Winky Don said to me, why don't you come and meet us at the diner? And I really thought, I don't know, I was months sober. And he was still reeling from me decking him. And I, really? Yes, you want to invite me? Yes, come. So I went to the diner and I sat with these 6 old men with decades of sobriety and thinking, what do they want from me? That's how grandiose I was, that they wanted something from me. And so they're talking round and round. And finally, Winky Don turns around and he says to me, Carin, what do you want? And I thought, this is my big chance. I'm going to tell them what I want. Well, for one thing, I want to stop hitting people because I don't want to be hit anymore. And I want to try and stay sober. And I don't want to be in this particular marriage. I need to get out of there. And my job is really not very good. And I need to get paid more money. And I'm not a very good mother. And I don't know how I'm going to put all this stuff down in the 4th step because I don't really like my son very much. And he said, I met from the menu. AA has loved me back in a very special way. And it doesn't stop me from going to the diner. And by the way, we have done that to other people and said that exact same thing and heard that exact same speech. So moving on to the 4th step. Here's the thing. I'm going to say things tonight you're going to disagree with. You are. And if your sponsor tells you to do it differently, listen to your sponsor. I can only tell you what was taught to me and how I did it. And how I was taught from day one is that you only have to do the steps once for yourself, one time. I've done them hundreds of times with other people, working the steps with them. But for me, I only had to do 1 4th step. That's it. That's very freeing, by the way. This is not a judgment. This is just what it is. I know people that I adore in this program that have good, solid sobriety do a 4th step every year. It's like time to pick that scab again. It's time to bleed a little bit again. We haven't quite healed from all of this. And they'll do a 4th step every year. In my experience, you do your 4th step once. And then if you have anything to take care of, it'll come up on the 10th step and you can deal with it then. And the 10th step is for the rest of your life. But I did 1 written 4th step. So I want to tell you a little bit about, oh, by the way, you really only have to do it once if you don't lie. If you lie, you got to go back. It's like, Monopoly. You got to go all the way back. You don't pass go, you don't get anything, you got to go back. So you can't lie when you do your 4th step. And you can't lie to yourself, and you can't lie on the paper, and you can't lie to the guy or the woman that you're talking to, and you sure as hell can't lie to God. But if you lie, you got to start again. Because if you lie, and by the way, it tells you right there in the 5th step, you will drink again. It's a promise. It's one of the promises of AA. If you screw around with your 4th step and do a half-assed job on your 5th step, we guarantee you're going to drink again. So when it came time for me to do my 4th step, I was terrified. I have to tell you, fear was my gasoline, frankly. And so I thought that if I did a 4th step that was neat and tidy, that my sponsor wouldn't really pay much attention as to what was on the page. So I went out and got a big ream of graph paper. Do you know what that is? Like the paper with the little boxes in it. And I started to do my 4th step, and I put 1 letter in each of the little boxes. Because I thought that if I presented him with this, ream of paper, that he would be so impressed with me that I had taken all this time to do it. And of course, I did a thorough 4th step. So by the end, I was like scratching all over the place. I was not in those boxes at all. I was so desperate to get this stuff out. When we talked about that a little bit last week, why do we do a 4th step? What's the point? What's the point? Why can't I just tell you what's wrong with me? Why do I have to write it down? Why do I have to write it down and and then do something with it after it's written down. And I still have my fourth step, by the way. It's buried, but I have it. And I wrote part of it in code, and I can write code, but I can't read code. And so that part was kind of left off of what I was doing in my fifth step. But I still have this fourth step in all my little graph boxes. So why do we do a fourth step? What's the point? First of all, it's the first tangible act of surrender that we do. The first tangible act. Take a pen, for me, it was easier. We didn't have any computers. We didn't have any cell phones. We didn't have any computers. It wasn't any other way to do it but to write it down on a piece of paper. And so there was that. But the thing that got me was my sponsor. He said, first of all, I want to tell you, I want to ease you up a little bit. And for anybody that hasn't done a fourth step, this eased me up a little. He says, no wrong way to do it. As long as you don't lie, you've done a correct fourth step. You have done a thorough fourth step. You have done a moral and fearless fourth step, as long as what you write on the paper is true. If I can't get any other point across to you tonight, that's it. Because more people don't do the fourth step out of fear of not doing it the right way. What's the right way? How much has to be on there? Do I go back to the womb? Do I start in high school? What do I do if I've been abused early? Do I put that in there? It doesn't matter. It's the act. It's the act of doing something that your sponsor has asked you to do that you absolutely know will make no difference to you in the long run, but you're going to do it anyway because they say to do it. And when it's over, you cannot believe the way you feel. That's what I was told. The only problem was when I did my fourth step, I didn't feel anything after. I felt nothing. I just felt like I put this stuff down, and after he read it, I have to shoot him. That's how I felt. That nobody should have the right to know that much about me. And by the way, if you're an alcoholic like me, and hopefully some of you are, I had lots of different sets of friends because I could not have any one set of friends that knew everything. That is no. So if you came into a room, you would know 6 things about me. You'd know 10 things about me. My greatest fear is that somebody would hold like a party for me and they would invite everybody and everybody would know something else and they'd put all the pieces together and that would be the end of me. That's how I felt about it going into the fourth step. So I cannot tell you, as long as you don't lie, there's no wrong way to do a fourth step. You just start. The other thing I want to put in here, highly unpopular to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that in this day and age, this is the year 2025, I see a lot of new alcoholics, not necessarily young, but new alcoholics downloading sheets from the internet and their guides to having to do, how to do the fourth step and their guides to what categories to do and lots of paper and whatever works so you find. This is how I did it. Your sponsor is your guide. If your sponsor is not your guide, get another sponsor. Your alcoholic next to you is your guide, not some piece of paper that's written by we don't know who that's being downloaded off the internet. I know it's unpopular for me to say this, but the reality is I go way back old school. One alcoholic listening and talking and identifying to another alcoholic about what they went through to get sober, what they went through when they were drinking, and this is how they got out of it. And you stick with me, I'm going to show you how to get out of it. I can't get that from the internet. And so if your sponsor is handing you your sheets, get another sponsor. I'm sure that'll go down well. So I don't care. I don't care. All my sponsors will tell you I don't care. They'll all give their vote. So here's the thing. Before you do the fourth step, interesting thing. Before you do the fourth step, make sure you're connected to your third step. Can't really do a proper fourth step unless you're connected to your third step. Whatever that thing is that you chose to believe in that was going to make a difference in your life in the third step, latch on to that. Latch on to that. And that's when I was given the prayer of my lifetime. This is all I've ever prayed for. All I've ever prayed for in AA. I pray for clarity and I pray for courage. Clarity to see things as they really are. How was I really? Because when you get to those funky columns in the fourth step and it's asking you to, what did it affect in you? And then we go to, the buzzwords, whatever they're using at the time. How did it really affect me? How it really affected me? Is that I wanted to kill you. How did it really affect you there? I wanted to die. You don't see that in the big book. You don't see that in those pages that you download, but you see it in the eyes of another alcoholic. And I need to know that the things that I did that were so heinous, and believe me, I did some little bad things, but most of the things I did were very bad. And my very first sponsor, Albert, I honored his living memory, and I only tell you the legal things when I get up here. He says, just share the legal stuff. Don't give them any ideas. And so when I have to go into what happened in my life and how I'm writing this down in a fourth step, I need to know there's somebody on the other end of this thing that's looking at me that says it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Let me tell you what I did. And let me tell you how I got out of there. So that's the most important thing. So I pray for clarity to see me for who I really am. And since we suffer from a disease of perception, that's why I drank, is to change the way things looked. It's hard, really hard for me to see me who I am, mostly because I was riddled in and out with fear. I'm not at all the person I am now, was then that I am now. I don't even recognize this person standing in front of you by the person that was there. I was ruled and riddled by fear. And now he's telling me that I have to make a fearless and moral inventory. And then I heard the words that I absolutely hate, and I've heard them my whole sober life, which is just do it. Just do it. Nothing will happen to you if you just do it, but plenty will happen to you if you don't. And if you don't remember anything else, you just do it. That's it. So this disease of perception talks a lot about in the book about how it warps our natural desires and that it's a disease of more. And it makes me laugh. It is a disease of more. I had lunch today in this, I don't know what they call them, assisted living places with my mother, who doesn't know me anymore, and my son and my brother. And, I was talking to my son, who I adore, and he was the first person that I put on my fourth step. And because I wasn't sober when I gave birth, and I wasn't a sober mother for the first 18 years of his life, and things that happened to him, he doesn't remember, but I sure as hell do. And so, I look at him and I'm talking about something, and I said to him, I'm so glad that I only had like one kid. He goes, really, why? And I couldn't tell him the truth. I could tell you the truth, but the truth is that having one son was the only time in my life I ever wanted one of anything. I mean, that's the truth. I have a disease of more. And I knew that I could never handle more than this one kid. And, he's almost 40 and he's a great kid. And he went to AA, for 8 years, not as an alcoholic, in a Snuggly and in a stroller. I mean, I just dragged him into these rooms because I didn't know what else to do with him. Needless to say, in the 80s and the early 90s, when you came into AA and if you admitted you were alcoholic and refused to go to a treatment center, which they did often, they would take your kids. So you had to be really careful with the way you were handling yourself. And shout out again, if I have to do this every meeting, I will. Shout out to the women who bring their children into the rooms of AA. And shout out to the men who give them shout outs when they come in. Because there is nothing tougher than being a single mother and schlepping your kid into a meeting, hoping you'll stay sober so you're a better mother. It took me years to get over the damage that was done to him in his first 18 months until I came into the rooms of AA. So I want to talk a little bit about, how I did this fourth step, because it was crazy. It wasn't fabulous. It's on graph paper. I'm writing things down that nobody knows about me. I don't yet know what a fifth step means. And I do know from a sponsor that, people around me, got to be careful about those people around me that say, you're going to surrender and do your fourth step. By the way, the word surrender does not appear in the big book. I'm not sure you realize that. The first 164 pages never appears, not there. You know what appears in the big book? Abandon yourself to God, not surrender yourself. And there's a good reason for that, because we're manipulators. We're deal makers. If you show me a surrender, I'm going to show you a conditional surrender. I'm going to give a little and take a little and give it a little and take a little, but I'm not going to be all in. Abandon yourself to God is flailing your arms out, falling off the cliff and saying, I know somebody will be there to save me on the other side. That's what we're talking about here. So I began with my resentments and learned very quickly that self-pity is a drug for me. That was the worst one, feeling sorry for myself, all of the time. If you had my life, you would drink too. If you had my life, you would use too. And so I felt sorry for myself, not realizing that the more I felt sorry for myself, the more I would feel sorry for myself. You can't get out of that. You can't get out of that. And by the way, guess what? Those sheets won't get you out of that either. They will not get you out of your pity party, but your sponsor will. But the man or the woman or the person that you're doing the steps with, they'll get you out because they felt sorry for themselves. So my problem was I came into AA with a lot of baggage, a lot of fear, a lot of self-pity, and this habit that manifested itself all different ways of, finding myself in a hardware store looking for a head of lettuce. I spent my whole drinking life doing that. I would wake up and I'm in a hardware store. Where's the lettuce? You're in the wrong store. This was over and over and over again. Whether I got married to some guy that, he turned out to be the wrong guy. What happened? I thought you were the right guy. You're in the hardware store looking for a head of lettuce. Over and over and over again. All of my defects came out and they all came down to the same thing. I didn't want to get out of the hardware store. It's my store. Sandy Beach, I'm sure many of you know them. He wrote Drop the Rock. He was an old friend of mine. Lovely, lovely, lovely man. And, he used to talk about, Drop the Rock. I'm not sure if you realize it, but when it was first talked about, he cleaned up his act, but he used to talk about it as a turd and not a rock. Because he thought we would relate to shit better. Oh, I said a bad word. I'm so sorry. Okay, so he thought we would, it's not the first time. It probably won't be the last. But he thought we would relate to that better. But he would say things like, it's my turd. How important that is to us as alcoholics. It's my defect. Don't tell me to get rid of it. It's mine. And that's how I wound up in the hardware store looking for a lettuce, holding on to whatever I was supposed to let go of. God bless you.
Thank you.
So the other thing that I want to talk about just a little bit that I brought into this fourth step, but I didn't know about myself.
I'm an alcoholic. 4 weeks ago. And I'm fucked up. And I don't care. Wait. I burned the siren. I'm spinning on. I know you do it. All right?
No, we don't slow these little man. Come on, bro.
Step 12, man. Service. I reached out to all y'all, man. After y'all left me hanging when I called all y'all, man. She having a step series, honesty, hope, faith, honesty, courage. You know what I'm saying? Spirituality. What's 12 step? Service. Y'all full of shit, man. How about this? Take this shit serious. I had 58 months. I'm not alcoholic. Thanks for letting me share.
And that is why we don't download sheets. Because there is nothing like one alcoholic relating to another alcoholic. And if you couldn't relate to this guy, you probably don't need to be here. Because that's how I came into AA. I came into AA yelling and screaming and hitting people. Because you didn't understand me. Because my case was different and his case was different. And we come in here to understand and we learn a day at a time that you're exactly like me. My case is exactly like yours. I may look differently than you do, but we all have the exact same disease here. So I'm going to move on a little bit because one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that I'm a runner. It was on my defect list, and I'm still a runner. I don't run, but I'm a runner. I'm a runner in my head. It's like I still smoke, but I don't smoke. I'm a smoker in my head. I'm a former smoker. I'm a former runner, but I'm a runner. And if there's one thing that my sponsor said he would literally beat out of me was my running instinct, because there's nothing that will get an alcoholic drunk faster than running. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that. And I hope everything is okay out there because it's getting a little loud. So somebody might want to take a little action. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, you may have to call the police. Okay. Somebody do me a favor. Make a phone call. He's all right? Okay. All right, so we'll move on, and I apologize because maybe they can cut all this out of the recording. Okay, we'll close the door on that. Anyway, going back to your columns, let's just get back to where we were for a moment. Take a deep breath, and thank God that that's not you. There, but for the grace of God, go I. I'm not sure if some of you remember this, because a lot of young people here, but most of us, when we came into AA, did not come in through treatment centers. We came in drunk. And frankly, for me, I just love the smell of a good alcoholic who comes in the room drunk. I still love that. I'll go back there and ask them how they're doing in a skinny minute, but I'm also the girl that leaves the meeting and walks right into that circle of people smoking cigarettes. I don't even know them, and I ask them how they are, because I love the smell of the smoke. I wish we still had this, but, people get sober in treatment houses. They come in and they don't enjoy what we used to enjoy. Is the good smell of a drunk. When I was sober in First Things First, I know. When I was sober in First Things First, there was a little room called the Little Room. Held 34 people. And in the back of the room was a big bathroom that we could all use. There was no coffee. You had to bring your own. There was no anything there. There was actually a turtle on the table. And it was the fourth step turtle, which I love, because the turtle is the only animal in the kingdom, including man, that has to stick their neck out to go forward. And I've always loved that. Every once in a while, some drunk would steal the turtle, and then, we'd have no turtle, and then they'd get sober, and the turtle would miraculously, reappear. So in this room, we learned how to rely on each other, especially when things like this happened. Because we had disruptions like this all the time. People would come in, and that's the way it was. And there was a couple that used to come in, and it's New York, remember, so anything goes. He used to wear a suit made out of smashed Pepsi and Coke cans. And they were all, so he made a lot of noise when he moved. And she used to wear a hat with a dress, and she had dirt all over her. She had live flowers that she had picked out of the park and had stuck them all over her. So she was literally dirty the entire time. And they would come and they would sit in the back of the room, and after about 10 minutes, they would go in the bathroom, and they would be in there for almost an hour, the two of them. And when they came out, they were clean. They used the bathroom and they got clean. So because we're alcoholics, we had to have a business meeting about this because too many people had to use the bathroom. And they had a business meeting, and they decided, much to my chagrin as a young alcoholic, because I said we need to make a rule so they can't come in here anymore because it's disgusting. And they made a decision to build a bigger bathroom so that more people could actually use the bathroom while they were in there. So that's what AA is about. I'm kind of just running through some things until we get some peace and quiet in this room again, and everybody can take a breath, and we can move on with the brilliance of doing a fourth step. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the columns that they do there. I don't know. Depending on what meeting you go to, whoever your sponsor is tells you to go horizontally. Somebody else tells you to go vertically. It's the only time that, it's the only time that I ever gave up. We didn't use the 12 and 12 for the fourth step. We took it right out of the big book, and we did it exactly what they said. And my sponsor was a devotee. Just read the black parts. Don't interpret anything that they're saying. Don't try to redo what they've done in here to fit you. So whatever those columns are, whether it affected you, what you did, what your part was, and all of those things. But, in the book, it talks about 7 deadly sins. And, I just say, nah, I don't care. I did not grow up with the 7 deadly sins. I couldn't name them. I don't know what they are. I think that I had far more than 7. And I think that they were much rougher than the ones they talked about in the book. But, I was told to guide myself by the 7 deadly sins. So, we did for a little while. But, I didn't list my assets either, even though it says in the book somewhere in there that, you should, in the 12 and 12, by the way, it doesn't say it in the big book. By the way, did you notice in the big book, it talks about progress, not perfection, all the time. And yet, when you study the 12 and 12, it talks all about perfection. I always found that interesting, that in the big book, there's no perfection. In the 12 and 12, there's perfection. And so I got sober and stayed sober with the big book. I worked with other alcoholics with the 12 and 12. And so I'm not sure what works for you, but you got to go with whatever works for you. Anyway, when you get down to those columns, they're talking about the final column in there, which was, what my part in it was. And I wasn't very happy about that. I really didn't want to take responsibility for anything. And again, get yourself a good sponsor. We'll tell you, nothing's going to happen to you if you put it down. Nothing will happen to you if you talk about what your part in it was. I had terrible parts in there. Said nothing will happen to you. It will happen to you if you don't put it down there. If you take that secret with you, something absolutely will happen. But if you put it down there, nothing will happen. So fear led the list. Fear guided me through every single thing I did in my life. I got married 5 times out of fear. Imagine that, 5 times out of fear. People laugh, I have somebody that loves me very much, tells me I'm in love with being in love. That's not true. I was afraid. Every single time I was afraid, and I thought this would cure me. And of course, I was in the hardware store, and it never cured me. My 3rd marriage, I actually loved him, and we'll talk about that later. But for the rest of them, the other 4, I didn't love anybody. I could have walked in a heartbeat. I'm a runner. I can walk. You can tell me you love me 1,000,000 times. I can walk, and that's how it was. I didn't because, you can't hit a moving target, and when the going gets rough, the tough get going, and that's what I lived by. The person that introduced me, she said something about me moving 21 times in sobriety. I moved many more times than that before sobriety. I moved, and I want to tell you that I had a pattern. And this is what I had to put in my 4th step. I had a pattern. I'd get an apartment. I always made money. I need to tell you, not a good thing for an alcoholic like me. But I always made a lot. I didn't just make money. I made a lot of money. Not a good thing. So I'd find a great apartment, and I'd move in there. And, one day I wouldn't make the bed. I don't know. Why do you make the bed? You got to get back in. So I wouldn't make the bed, and I'd go on my day. And every day I would come home, and I wouldn't make the bed. And then one day, I would come home and say, why do I have to do the dishes? I can't get somebody else to do the dishes. What's the point? And then one day I would come home and there'd be no dishes to do because they were all filthy and they were all in the sink. And so I would go to the store and I'd buy another set of dishes. And I would buy sheets and I would buy clothing because I didn't do my laundry because I didn't see the point of that either. And then one day I'd look up and there'd be a couple people living there with me because they thought it was a really good thing. Nobody had to do any chores and we kept getting new things every week and, and they just loved it. And then I would turn around and there'd be somebody in my bed and I wouldn't recognize them, but they had assured me they'd been there for quite some time, because I'm a blackout drinker and I don't really know what's going on. And then one day I would wake up and it was kind of like I came to and I'd turn around and I'd see people living in my house. I'd see dishes I didn't recognize, clothing I didn't recognize. And I did the only thing an alcoholic would do. I picked up my purse and I left. And I left every single thing I owned. And I didn't do this once or twice. I did this over and over and over again. And by the way, just for good measure, every time I did it and moved someplace else, I changed my name. I changed my name. I changed my social security number. I changed my license. I changed my college degree. I changed everything about me. I took doing a geographic to an art form. Literally an art form. Somewhere around 8 years of sobriety, I got a letter from the government that literally said, "Dear whoever you are." We want what you have and we're willing to go to any length to get it. And I didn't pay attention. I'm on the run. And I thought after I had done all these steps and I was a clean, good girl and everything was good and I crossed it off, I forgot about this. And the reason I forgot about this, when I tell you don't lie, don't lie. I forgot about it because they never came up and asked for it. So I thought it had to have gone away. That's how we think as alcoholics. I'm 8 years sober. I get this letter. I turn around and say to my sponsor, "What do I do?" She says, "Well, they're telling you what to do. You got to appear in this place, in this courthouse, at this day, at this time." And she said, "I'll go with you." So she goes, and I'm looking at what's going on there, and I'm thinking, if they nick me, I'm going to jail. There's no question about that. And so there were 4 different places that I could have gone. They had 4 different people in them, who were set to take care of you. And there was this one woman at the end, had like blue hair and those glasses, those cat's eye glasses. And I kept thinking, please God, not her, anybody but her, not her. And that's exactly who they gave me. And I walked over to her and she said, "Is this your name? Yes. Is that your name? Yes. Is this your name? Yes." On and on and on. She said, "Did you do this? And did you do that?" And my sponsor said to me, "Why don't you go up there and talk to her and do something you're not good at doing? Why don't you tell her the truth?" So I just looked at her and I said, "This is who I am, and I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been sober for 8 years, and I go to meetings every day, and I sponsor other people, and I have a job, and I'm a single parent, and this is my sponsor, and she's sitting in the courtroom, and I know that I've done something wrong, but I'm here to do my time for it." And she turned around and said to me, "My son was never able to get sober." She said, "Congratulations on your 8 years. Can you pay us back $10 a month, no interest?" Now, I'm not a brain surgeon, but I already knew by that amount that I would be paying them for more than 200 years. And she knew I'd be paying them for 200 years. It wasn't the point. The point was, she said, "Don't forget and don't be late." And so for all of those years, I paid it back until I made a lot of money one year and I paid all the rest of it back, in one big thing. But, she taught me a lesson. She taught me a lesson, a 4th-step lesson that I didn't even remember and didn't even realize. So by the time I got to that last column where there's like a magic column in there that maybe your sponsor knows about, but those sheets don't know about, that, basically says to you, what would you do differently? If you were in the same situation, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? And, the answer is easy, by the way. I do the opposite of what I did. That's it. It's not brain surgery. I do the opposite of what I did, and that's what that column would be. And he let it go. He goes, "Okay, that's good. Let's move on." And then came the lists. And the lists bothered me. Oof, good. First of all, there was the sex list. And, first, I have to be very honest with you. I'm a blackout drinker. I could only tell you a certain amount. And after that, it's just numbers. I have no idea. And, he made me a very good woman, my sponsor. He said, "I'm not asking you who you had sex with. I'm asking you who you had sex with to manipulate to get what you want." It's a whole different thing. Men do it. Women do it. We all do it. And so I had to do a sex inventory just doing that, which was a relief to me because I really thought they were going to ask me how many people I slept with. And I didn't know. You know, it was the 80s, it was the 90s, you know, it was just say who. I mean, it's just, that's all that it was. But I could remember what I had done. I could remember who I had manipulated. And so I, wrote all those things down. And then we got to the fear list. And I didn't understand why my entire fourth step was riddled with examples of fear and what I did about the fear and what I had to do about the fear and how it infected my life everywhere, why I had to do a fear list. He says, this is basic stuff. Take a piece of paper out, write down every single thing you're afraid of. This is after I did my fourth step. Wrote it all down. Write down every single thing you're afraid of, no matter how minuscule it is. I'm afraid of being well. I'm afraid of being sick. I'm afraid of being married. I'm afraid of being divorced. I'm afraid of living. I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid of getting the job. I'm afraid of not getting a job. I'm afraid of waiting to find out if I'm going to get the job. Anything that you can think of, I want the list. I have no idea. There were hundreds of things on this list. And he said, now take that list. That list does not go to God. That's your list. Your private list. Put it up on the refrigerator. And every time you do something and one of those fears is not present, I want you to cross it off. Just cross it off the list. And as the years went on, the list looked like a bunch of cross-offs. And one day I looked at it, and there was nothing left on the list. Every single fear had been crossed off. Doesn't mean that they weren't replaced by other fears, but they're regular fears. They're normal fears. They're things you should be afraid of. They're not irrational fears. There's no waking up in the morning and being afraid and you can't figure out what it is that you're afraid of. These were normal things that you should be afraid of. But the list was invaluable to me. It kept me on my toes for a very long time. And, I lived alone, then married, lived alone, married. Nobody cared about the list. My husbands thought that it was silly. I thought it was a lifesaver, an absolute lifesaver. So a couple more things that I want to, blow out there with. They talk a lot about emotional insecurity, which who wants to talk about that? Really, that's unzipped. That's your armor's off. My emotional insecurities, worry, anger, self-pity, depression, all of those things. The thing is this, until I finished my fourth step and I started putting all those things down and connecting them with people, they were never going to go away. We don't have these things by ourselves. We don't live in a vacuum. We like to think we do. We're Los Lobos, we're the lone wolf. But we're not. Every single one of these defects is connected to somebody. It's not by ourselves. It's the acts we perpetrate on other people. And, it took me years, by the way, years and years to remember some of the things that I had done. And that's why I'm saying you do the best job you can do on the fourth step. You write it all down, you get it all out. 10 years later, 20 years later, you might remember something that wasn't on there, and that's okay. That's okay. That's what a 10th step is for. It's no coincidence that they tell you that you have to do 9th step amends for the rest of your life. That's not because you're a bad person the rest of your life. That's because we're alcoholics and we don't remember anything. And so you're going to remember things later on in your life and you'll have to do those amends. And, I've had the most extraordinary experiences meeting people that I did terrible things to, later on in sobriety, that I just never thought that I would have the opportunity to say anything at all to them. And we'll talk about making amends and all of that. But what I'm saying is that the more you write down, the healthier you're going to be. That's another thing I want to bring up in the time we have. Sometimes I do these talks and it reminds me of the things that irritate me in AA. And this is one of the things that irritates me is that you hear somebody in AA and they say, hi, my name is Susan, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm just as crazy as the day I walked in. That's a lie. Don't let anybody with any time tell you that in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. From the moment you get here, the moment you walk in and you put that drink down, you are well. You are well. And if you come back the next day, you're going to be weller. And if you come back the next day, you're going to be even more well than that. And when that person comes in here with one day and you have 7 days and you say you're crazy as anything and I got 1 day, I'm out of here. We're responsible for those people coming in. Whoever took that white chip tonight, you may have a chance of staying sober, young man, and I'll tell you why, because you bought a soda out there just to make sure that you could pay for it with a credit card. And the first thing out of your mouth was, I'm going to give it away to somebody else. So you got a shot of making it in here, because that's what we learn, that when we give it away, that's what makes us better. And so I will just say that no matter how long you're in here, I'm looking at a room full of well people. And by the way, I need you to be well. I need you to be really well. I can't hang around, wax anymore. I've done that for a long time. It's just the way that is. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and I've said this to you before, is that I had a mentor in Clancy. And after I did my fourth step and I was about to do my fifth step, he, in his Clancy inimitable way, called me and said, "You're not done." He said, because for special people, that's a lie, by the way, he did this with everybody. He said, for special people, I have a set of 7 questions I'm going to ask you. And if you didn't cover them in your fourth step, you have to go back. Some of us are lucky enough to have had this happen to them. And so I'm going to read you the 7 questions because at the time they irritated me. Now I think they're extraordinary. The first question, and he asked me, in looking back over your life, what memories are still guilty, still painful, or still dirty? Be as thorough and specific as possible. It's pretty harsh. Question 2, today, just today, in what ways do you feel inadequate as a person? I'm like, he's killing me. He's killing me. I've done this 4th step and he's literally killing me. Then number 3, who do you still resent? Who do you still resent, and tell me why? So that clearly says that I left somebody off of there. I didn't even know I left anybody off of there. Then number 4, in what ways, what do you conceive to be your defects of character as you see them from where you are right now? And by the way, don't trip up on this defects of character and character defects or all that. It's all the same stuff. Bill's creative. It's all the same thing. Nothing means anything different. Although I've heard a lot of old timers come up with these scenarios of this means this and this means that. Same thing. It's the stuff we did that was bad. It's the stuff we don't want to have in us. Because once we clear out all of this stuff, then God moves in. Okay, number 5. Ugh. What is the nature of your ongoing problems with the people around you? Hated that. And where can you see any pattern where again and again and again and again the same things come up? This is after I've done my 4th step. Then he said, where did this come from? He said, what are your goals in life? Realistic or not? I don't know about you, but nobody really asked me. Nobody asked me, other than Don in the diner, who asked me what I wanted, and that turned out to be the menu. Nobody asked me what I wanted. Nobody asked me what my goals were. He asked me what my goals were. And then the last question he asked was, do you see anything that you can begin to use in AA to start towards any of these goals? I just love that, because we're big on looking outside of Alcoholics Anonymous for the answers. But all the answers are in the book. All the answers are in the big book. All the answers are in the 12 and 12. But you're not going to see them until they're down on paper. You're just not going to see them. So the couple of other things I want to say before we close up is that I kept my 4th step. I didn't keep it for any other reason other than every once in a while I try to read it. And like I told you, I wrote some of it in code, and I don't have whatever the decoder part is, so I don't really know what I was talking about. It's in the less neat parts of the graph paper, but I keep it, and I advise you to keep it. If you do your 1/4 step, I advise you to keep it. You don't have to have it on display. It doesn't have to be framed, just so you know you did it. Just so you know you did it. So when you go to sponsor someone and they say, did you do your steps? Did you do your 4th step? You say yes. And they say, how many have you done? As many as I was supposed to do. That's why I did 1/4 step. That's it. So the last thing that I want to touch on here is that one of the things that comes from doing a thorough 4th step, and I'm not really going to touch on the 5th step, but it comes from doing a thorough 4th step, is a feeling, it's a weird thing. You have a modicum of dignity. I don't know how that happens, but you do. You get a little bit of dignity that you didn't have before, and you get a little bit of confidence that you didn't have before, because you did it. It's done. And as much as I did, it's perfect. It's not going to get any more perfect 10 years from now. It's absolutely perfect for where I am right here and right now. And I got a little bit of confidence over that. And then I got a little bit of dignity over that. And then, we got back to the word that we all hate, but I got a little trust over that as well. I said, I think I can talk to somebody about that. I wouldn't have been able to talk to anybody about that when I began my 4th step because it was overwhelming. But the more I wrote down, the more I realized I can do this. I can do this. And by the way, it's not me at all. It's God's work. If you put a piece of paper in my hand, you put a pen in my hand, I'm not writing down my fears. I'm not writing down the terrible things that I did. I'm not doing any of those things. That's the 3rd step. And every time I sat down to write, and I didn't take a very long time because I had a sponsor, by the way, that sat on me. Get one that sits and who's fat, maybe, who really sit hard on you. So I didn't take a long time doing it. It was in and out in less than a week. I know people will say I've been working on my fourth step for 6 months. Who wants to sit in that kind of pain for 6 months? I have no idea, but they do. That's our default, sitting. I guess we love the pain. I don't know. But when we're done and we've emptied out and everything is on paper, we don't have to wait very long. As a matter of fact, they tell you don't wait at all. Don't wait at all. Get with the person that you're going to talk to about this because you're emptied out and God is beginning to move in. And until you feel that, you have no idea what bright grace is like. That it does, you don't feel like the person you were when you got here. You don't feel like the person you were when you started this step. You don't feel like these things are filling you, and you're on your way. Because it's the first tangible act that we have done that says, I am willing to do something that I don't yet believe in, because I'm going to do it anyway, because you told me to do it. And so when we move out from the fourth step, we need something to move in. Because God and nature both abhor a vacuum. So something will move in, and since we don't know what that is moving in, that's why we move and we seek outside help. Outside help, which comes in the form of the fifth step. We're going to talk about that next week. But in case you haven't figured out, AA is riddled with seeking. We're constantly seeking something. So when we're done with the fourth step, you literally close the book on it, you pick up the phone, and you say, I'm ready to go. That's it. Because something is going to move in and you will be filled. And yes, I guess you're on the way to being rocketed to the fourth dimension. But it is the most extraordinary feeling and you're on your way. And by the way, it never goes away. And that's in the promises. It never goes away. So I think that's it on the fourth step. It's a great day to be sober. We'll pick up step 5 next week.
Oh, wow.